All right. We were supposed to have 3 people, but we only have 2 now. And, for the amount of things that we can talk about Hong Kong, we said maybe we should broaden the topic a little bit. Instead of just talking about Hong Kong, let's talk about, all of Asia, right? And since, we're both in venture, maybe one of the things that we can start off, talking about is, what do you think of investing in Asia, right? Especially over the last 9 months. Very, very high level question. What do you think about what are you seeing in this space?
I think, first of all, looking very good on the picture over there. And I think we should probably start off with introductions, right? I think people would like to know who you are and who I am, and maybe that gives some more context on like where we should take this discussion.
Sure. The photo is very Photoshopped, so.
Not there anymore.
Oh, it's not there anymore. Okay. So maybe you can go first, David.
All right. Hey, guys. So Dave again here. Started OP Crypto about 2 years ago, but previously was leading global strategy and investments at Huobi for 4 years. And prior to that, was an investment banker, entrepreneur. And what OP Crypto does is we're an early stage Web3 venture capital firm, mostly based out of the US, but now have extension and have offices in Hong Kong and Beijing. So what we do is really take some of the best talent to invest in the Western market and help them sort of bridge to the Eastern market to help them acquire users, help them with exchange listings and everything to do with partnership within the Asian market.
Good introduction, man. I'm David. I sit at Kronos Ventures. Kronos Ventures sits as a ventures platform for a broader ecosystem. The parent company is called Kronos Research. Kronos Research was started in 2018 with 2 people. And then it became a market maker focusing on crypto. At the height of the bull market, Kronos Research probably traded in excess of $5 billion USD worth of volume on a daily basis. The ventures business was started in early 2021. Back then it was maybe 3 or 4 people putting in 20% capacity just exploring the space. Fast forward to today, we've invested into about 70 projects, 65 or 70 projects or so, across a broad spectrum of Web3 categories. Really interested in this space and looking forward to meeting interesting people. All right, introductions are done. So with that kind of said, going back to our original question, right? How do you see about investing in investments in general, and with a particular focus on, what do you see about investments in Asia versus the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit of distinction between what is happening in Asia versus what's happening in the Western world. So I think on a higher level, for those people that are not in the investment field, is like the Western markets are a lot more infrastructure focused, right? Where the Asian market is more consumer facing. And in terms of like trying to find the best investments across both markets is actually extremely hard. But I think what we've built as a team in that we are 15 people across both markets and have really sort of know-how in both sides, in that I've spent almost equally amount of time in the US and also in Asia, roughly around 16 years in both. And a lot of it is still being able to like dissect the person on its own, right? So it's less so that we think about it in terms of like whether it's like product market fit. At the earlier stage, we have a term that we think about our investment is like founder market fit, right? It's like, can the person that we're investing into really adequately build a product that can really cater into the different marketplaces that they're tapping into, right? So I think that's what's the core fundamental thesis for us, is try to find the best person and to find them early and give them the right resources that they can use to succeed in the long run and capture market that they're going for.
Very, very interesting, right? So like David, I also have kind of like an East-West background, and I didn't really get into what I did before joining crypto in 2020. Well, for about 17 years before that, I worked also in finance and investment banking, private equity at many different places, mostly in the US. Over the last 3 years or so, I would say that I've been traveling the world, but spending the majority of my time in Asia, right? the qualities of founders, right, across geographies are yet different, but melded together by a few characteristics that I see as, okay, this is a great team, and we want to really invest in a founder. Some of the things that I think are very, very interesting would be, how charismatic is this person, and yet it's not just the charisma, but can you button down and execute, right? I think these are very, very important. It's not just, okay, if you have a conversation, is this guy coming off as a sharp person, which I think they need to essentially check off that box immediately. It's the things that you see, that you observe, that are kind of like a little bit outside of the box, right? To go with that. So segueing a little bit, right, into what we're supposed to talk about on this topic, right? And we've kind of seen, Hong Kong. We've seen many things happen with Hong Kong, right? What do you see, for Hong Kong as kind of like this regulated, geography where everyone's looking at? It's like, okay, please formulate these regulations so everyone looks upon, right? What do you see as the growth of crypto in Hong Kong over the next 2 to 3 years or so?
Yeah, so I think when you think about Hong Kong as a territory, you simply cannot ignore the fact and a behemoth in the room in China, right? So I think ultimately China is by far the biggest crypto market in terms of scale and addressable market. And Hong Kong is almost like a gateway or portal to that market, right? And using Hong Kong as an early building block to really test out some of the regulatory frameworks, some of the innovations that can be done in crypto and blockchain space, particularly for the Hong Kong space, that eventually can lead to more mass adoption within the China market. But also, Hong Kong is now serving as almost a crypto hub, right? Kind of like what New York or San Francisco is like for the US, right? It's actually drawing not only capital to be invested in whether sort of some of the new approved like BTC or Ethereum ETFs, but more so like a lot of different innovation centers that's geared towards attracting developers and entrepreneurs to build protocols within the Hong Kong market that can serve to the rest of the APAC side, right? So I think as really Singapore tightened its regulations, gave Hong Kong a lot of room for them to really open up and be more friendly to founders looking to set up jurisdictions in Hong Kong and use Hong Kong as a satellite to serve the greater APAC market and even as a bridge to the US, right? So I think that's where some of the merits where Hong Kong has to offer right now, but obviously a lot of this stuff is still at infancy, and we very much look forward to what Hong Kong can open up for the rest of Asia and the entrepreneurs that it's able to bring there.
Very, very interesting. Outside of Hong Kong, right, do you see other jurisdictions playing different roles within kind of like the development of a crypto project lifecycle? So for example, if the Hong Kong is the gateway to interfacing with the West, right, which geographies do you think could be the gateway of getting the right developers, right, at the right costs, very friendly towards projects like that? How do you see other geographies?
Yeah, so I'm actually, in terms of this particular, I think Taiwan has done it very well in that like it has a very native crypto developer ecosystem and also a very sort of crypto interested retail consumer market, right? So Taiwan is pretty much the non-biased version that's really able to have both the Western and Eastern sort of DNA intertwined within one country. And I think that is the small sort of foundational layer that we can see as what really like crypto is all about, right? To be an industry without borders, right? So we shouldn't really think about like each individual market on its own, because I think whenever we think about crypto as a space, it's like very, very international, right? Each and every single person, as they launch a protocol, it's aimed to go international almost from day one, right? So as much of like whether each important community is segregated from each other, there should be ways where we can break down some of those boundaries, we can break down some of those language barriers, and also break down some of those payment rails that crypto has a way to really facilitate global commerce, right? And that's what really crypto is able to do. Is that like right now in traditional financial rails, is that like it's very hard to interact between country to country, right? Like if you want to buy something in another country, it's very difficult to really transact with the merchants there. But with crypto, it's pretty much, sending money or monetary value or any sorts of value as easily as you can send a text or do a credit card payment or do anything that is able to be an exchange of value, right? And that's extremely meaningful as we look to do commerce across a bigger global scale. And that really starts with the Asia market because that's where consumers are actively spending money. There's not really sort of the B2B SaaS side of it. And it's really like a consumer first facing economy.
Very, very interesting. And I think to go to your point, David, for Kronos research, right, the vast majority of our developer base is actually based in Taipei. We have our headquarter office location there with more than 100 people as part of Kronos research. Despite the fact that the ventures team is very diversified internationally, we think that for that particular core universe of people, it's better to be based in Taipei, in Taiwan. So with that said, like maybe we can like quickly go into, people have been talking about Hong Kong and its comparisons to Singapore, which is viewed as kind of like this other, hub where a lot of crypto projects are, featured in. How do you see, what do you see are the pros and the cons of Hong Kong versus Singapore?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on the audience, right? Every single audience has different needs, and that's why like both industries or both sort of jurisdictions is a very blooming sort of ecosystem on its own, right? I would say that like Singapore definitely has a lot more VCs versus Hong Kong has a lot more traders and people in financial services, right? So I think ultimately like Hong Kong has a big sort of TradFi industry as like some of the biggest banks globally across the world, right? They all have a presence in Hong Kong, and that just makes anything related to sort of transition of TradFi into DeFi something that like Hong Kong is a great hub for, and Singapore is like a great hub for really a regulatory friendly environment for family offices, asset managers, institutional fund managers, venture capitalists, angel investors, people that are able to sort of enjoy the more tax-friendly bracket, but also be able to enjoy sort of the friendliness towards people of different jurisdictions that are coming into Singapore, right? I think ultimately, both have its pros and cons. I think the cons is that like neither market really has a big market in terms of like addressable market for developers, like retail community, or simply like sheer size of per capita, right? So at the end of the day, right, a lot of it is really just the financial aspect of it on both sides, but there's not that much innovation on either sides of the market, which I think with sort of the new regulatory reform, like we'll be able to see additional innovation coming into those two jurisdictions.
Awesome, very, very interesting. As you see the regulatory reform happen, right, over in the East, and there's defining, angles of regulation. So for example, Hashkey and OSL getting their licenses in Hong Kong, right? Do you see founders shifting away from the West to the East? Have you already kind of seen that, or do you think that that'll happen in the future?
Yeah, so actually over sort of this past year that I have been spending a lot more time in Asia, I've actually been, surprisingly been encountering a lot more Western personnel within sort of the Asia market, right? And a lot of this is like very, very spread out. I think already like Hong Kong and Singapore would probably expect and see a lot of expats, but I'm talking about like places like Indonesia, Bali, or like Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, or even like in Japan, right? When I went for Tokyo, like almost half, I wouldn't say half, probably maybe 1/3 of the people that came are like from Western descent, right? And when I went to some of the hacker houses in Vietnam, like probably maybe like 2-3 years ago or even 5 years ago, you won't say a single Western person in the room. And now I think a lot of Western founders have really opted for a better standard of living in the Asia market while being able to be a remote first team, have better tax benefits, and also be able to just lower significantly on the cost of R&D and really building up a core team and reducing runway, right? So I think that mentality has been taken a lot more by sort of Western teams, where like some of their core team and the founders might still be Western, but they will hire a lot of the back-end team and developer team in Asia, where it's a lot more productive. It's a lot, I wouldn't say more talented, but like in terms of like the cost benefit, it's much more weighing on sort of the Asian market.
Yeah, so one thing to add to this, right, and I've seen a decent amount of projects, right, especially in the wake of the SEC investigation into Binance and into Coinbase, right, there's been extreme regulatory uncertainty, particularly in the US. And ever since that, like I think in Europe, right, MiCA's going to come out with like new, more stringent regulations around crypto. Founders who started their projects in these ecosystems are now thinking, wait a minute, what's going to happen? Do we wait for the regulations to basically be 100% planted and then we figure it out, or do we go to a jurisdiction where where everything is going to be more defined, right? Everything is starting to be more defined or is more defined, and they know that you're not there's less gray areas and more black and white areas, and they know exactly what to do. And I think plenty of these projects are moving away from the West to the East and figuring out what is the right geography to domicile themselves. Wow. Okay. So let's go back to maybe one more question about Hong Kong, and I really wanted to get a sense for this, right? Did you get a sense that after the Web3 conference, right, and after after the Web3 conference, did Hong Kong become a more bullish geography for crypto projects in general? I guess it's a combination of after the Web3 conference, as well as the announcement of the regulatory changes, right?
Yeah, so I haven't been back to Hong Kong since the Web3 festival, but definitely just being present during the Web3 festival, like it definitely did not feel like a bear market, right? So it very much felt similar to like 2018 consensus when everything was sort of hype. There's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of people new that's coming into the space. So I think obviously the aftermath of it, it's gonna take a lot more time to really smoothing sort of some of the regulations to be and paving the way for more people to come into the space. But definitely it's a positive sign, right? And any time that a country or an SAR like Hong Kong can open up as much as it did and have really key government officials within sort of the highest ranks of political power come in and be sort of the voice backing the ecosystem as a whole, I think then like we're really heading towards the right direction. And I'm honestly very excited to see what comes up next, and I definitely plan to visit sometime later this year.
As we talked about projects being built in the East, and then we also talked about projects shifting focus from the West to the East, right? As a lot of these things happen, do you see more of a global element in a lot of the newer projects, right, being incubated, right? Do you see more of like, instead of focusing on a particular geography, they're more focused, broadly, right?
So I think that just the sheer notion of crypto as a space is like, you don't necessarily have to restrict yourself to one specific jurisdiction at a time. I think that's what's something about the Korea market where they're a bit more restrictive, given that a lot of sort of Korean apps are very siloed from within. But I think ultimately, like, there are many more projects actually aiming after the Korea market. So at the end of the day, right, it's ultimately depending on what you exactly are building. But if I were to incubate a project, or if I were to be an early advisor of something, I'll always try and go for as much early initial market share as possible across the globe, right? And I think it doesn't really matter where the user is coming from, because a lot of, like 99% of the projects or protocols can be used online, right? And it doesn't matter if you're in China or in Korea or anywhere in the world, like the product functions the same. So with that mindset, I think a lot of people, as they build their products, they should just go for like the crypto native users that can get and be power users for them early. And that's something that we very much help as sort of the initial investors in any founder that we back, is to be able to help them source some of their early founders. And it's actually a really fascinating thing to have multiple cultures and backgrounds all within one chat. Is that then like they're able to really share some of that experiences with their friends, and like that really compounds on itself. So again, like I wouldn't be too focused on sort of which jurisdiction it is, but the founders do have to think about setting up their project in a jurisdictional friendly fashion so that they then can go after sort of users at a greater scale and mass across the globe.
Got it. Very interesting. As you look at projects, right, across the globe, right, and you look at projects in the East and you look at projects in the West, right, what are the key differentiating factors that you see that are characteristics of founding teams in the East versus founding teams in the West? And how can, like, you know, the pros and the cons of each geography, if they talk to one another, what would you say as advice that, you know, one side can give to the other?
Yeah, so I think for the West, it's very much focused on the underlying infrastructure, right? No one in the West is really building a consumer-facing first product, right? It's always about how do we improve the underlying infra layer so that eventually applications can be built on top. But no one is actually building those applications in the Western market because they're so focused on really getting the infra layer right. Whereas for the Asian founders, they're kind of waiting for some of the infra layer to be built so that they can be the ones to actually build on those infra to be able to make a consumer-facing product that they can go out and attract users to be able to use these applications, right? So if they really were to work together, then it will be kind of like a combination and the best of two worlds where like you have something that's robust on the underlying layer plus like a workable product that people are willing and able to use, right? That they can actually apply to their day-to-day lives.
Yeah. To add to that, right, I do think depending on the geographies, right, and depending on where the core teams are, there will be strengths in different geographies for different things. So for example, teams, founding teams that come out of San Francisco in the Tech Valley are going to have strong developers, right? Now, the key for us assessing would be, okay, your co-founders, where are they based, right? You know, if your co-founders if everyone is in San Francisco and you're all strong developers, I actually view that as a negative because you all think alike, right? If your co-founders are, you know, based in Europe and has like a marketing degree, right, corresponding with like a strong developer talent, I view that as a huge plus because you're covering each other's deficiencies, right? And I see this as, you know, we prefer teams that are pretty global with diversified skill sets. And I also think that the go-to-market strategy across different geographies and how you kind of go to market, right, are quite different. And so getting the right marketing talent for one geography may not necessarily mean that you can, you know, have the right go-to-market in another geography. There are some things, you know, that can be reused, but a lot of it is very different. Okay. I give this, okay, very, very interesting. What are your overall thoughts? And you know, we talked about this, you know, a little bit personally because I've known you for quite some time, right? What are your overall thoughts on Chinese-based projects over the next 3 to 4 years?
I don't know why you specifically say 3 to 4 years, but I think us as a venture fund, we always think about an even longer time scale, like 5 to 10 years and beyond. Obviously, every cycle is usually 3 to 4 years, but I think at the end of the day, right, like I wouldn't say I'm bullish on Chinese-based entrepreneurs, but I'm very much bullish on like Chinese entrepreneurs building the future Web3 that can apply to international markets, right? Kind of like really where like TikTok has taken place, and now it's like a global phenomenon. Like Pinduoduo, right, now has really taken global market share and having sort of their US variants that also able to capture the market similar the way that they were able to capture in China. So I think being able to just simply have the biggest addressable consumer market in China, and just the way that Chinese entrepreneurs think about network effects, about being consumer first, facing first, allows them to just dream a lot bigger in terms of like at what scales their applications and the products that they build can achieve, right? So I do really very much believe in sort of the Chinese dream, as you say. It's really like being able to take something very little and grow it via network effects and via word of mouth, and just really a very robust product that consumers really need, and even including some, like, I wouldn't say Ponzi-nomics, but like there's ways to like create really great incentivization programs within the protocols and the projects themselves that really just encourage mass adoption and encourage that virality element that Chinese projects always seem to find the right way to get people talking, right? And I think a lot of those is geared and best fitted for Chinese founders who have sort of that level of mentality.
Got it. Very, very interesting. Since we're here in Korea, right, I wanted to get a sense for what your thoughts on the overall, Korean ecosystem. What do you look for if you are looking, at a project in Korea, and how bullish are you?
Yeah, so I first of all look for like what is the burgeoning ecosystem that's still left, right? So obviously after the Terra collapse, everything kind of scattered and kind of went their own separate ways. There definitely needs to be a new uplift of like a strong ecosystem that can really cater to the Korean user base. And I believe that like some of the things that might be coming out that people can use in the future is that like as there's more Korean taxes that come into play, maybe DeFi is something that people can use that to really be more tax efficient and also be non-custodial, right? With all of these things, you're relying on a centralized party, you're relying on other people to hold and manage your assets, you're relying on other parties that are not very transparent and opaque about how they're doing business. I think the Korean market as a whole has suffered time and time again because of that lack of transparency. So I think at the end of the day, right, like there has to be some level of community. And I think this is something that particularly like the NFT space has really taken and drawn different communities to be under one common goal, right? Or one common sort of archetype in that they all believe in sort of this type of vibe that like that community can be there and stick for each other. I haven't really seen that in Korea yet, and I think that is pretty common in a lot of different sort of the biggest NFTs that's been viral across the world, like Pudgy Penguins. You guys invested in obviously Bored Apes that I'm wearing on my shirt, like Azuki's sort of in Asia, and I think like a lot of that, like as a Korean market, nothing has really stuck, but I do think that like there is that like Korean culture is really about being there for your brothers, being there for family, and sticking up for each other, right? So maybe NFTs is a way where people can really be drawn together and really make a tight-knit community from that, right?
Yeah. To add to that really quickly, I think Luna Terra as well as the Deeppegging UST has hit the Korea community hard. Korea does have a number, and the percentage of like retail traders in the Korea market is actually higher than a lot of other places. So there's definitely this degen trading ecosystem, and I totally agree that we need to wait for the next project to benefit from uplifting this ecosystem, right? I still think Luna Terra UST collapse is still fresh in the minds of a lot of people that are in crypto in the community. So that's it.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.